This is Francisco Hidalgo. He is a Mexican orphan that Major Holiday, that's Doc Holiday, his father, brought back from Mexico when he was mustered out. Francisco was actually smuggled back into the country because he was an orphan and he was coming from a foreign country. Many people think that he lived in the Holiday home, and he was an adopted brother of Doc Holiday, which is wrong. This is Sophia Walton, who lives over in Pike County. She is great-great-granddaughter of this couple. And these are the censuses of Pike County. As I told you, he was actually born in Pike County, and that is a Pike County census. And Francisco Hidalgo is on that in 1850. And also with the Collins family, he is on that in 1850. So that tells us that the Pike County census came before the Henry County census. And the reason that he moved into the house with the Collins family, what oral history has told us over the years, is that this couple was actually two school teachers. So Major Holiday had enough savvy about him to realize that Francisco Hidalgo, being a young Mexican boy coming out of Mexico, spoke absolutely zero English. So they put him in the household with a family that taught. And but every book that you pick up and you read, you'll hear that he was born in Spalding County, which is wrong, and that he was an adopted brother of Doc Holiday, which is wrong. He didn't live in the Holiday house, but he actually married Francis, this Freeman lady here from Pike County, Amatha Freeman, and they were married at the time of both of them's death, of his death. And this is Sophia Walton. This is the servant in the house over in Pike County. That John Stiles Holiday, who was Doc's uncle, his favorite uncle to be exact, she is actually the person that taught Doc Holiday and all of his cousins how to play cards. So he didn't just pick up cards out. He had actually sat over in Fayetteville, Georgia, and played cards in the Holiday Dorsey Fife house over there. And this is the slaves that were in the Holiday household and Doc Holiday's father's household, Mariah and Harry Holiday. And I researched those people and just got lucky. After I found the two graves, I went to the archives in Atlanta, and believe it or not, I just picked 1,880 out of the clear blue sky to be my starting date on, the film to find out who these people were. And lo and behold, 15 or 20 minutes later, I had them. So I was anticipating like an all-day event, if you want to know the truth. I was looking to be up there most of the day, but I guess I just got lucky, blessed, or whichever it was, and picked 1880, and within 15 minutes, I had the family. So I know who they were, and I know who the children were and the grandchildren. This is the grave of Martha Eleanor Holiday. That's Doc's sister that died before he was born. She only lived 6 months and 9 days, and she is buried out in Oak Hill Cemetery. And in 1990, the Kiwanis Club went out and built that wall and put up a real nice marker designating who that was in that grave. And so we know for a fact that is her grave. I don't know if you have heard the research that I've done on the Doc Holiday and his father's grave or not, but I'm convinced that the tree out there behind the library in Griffin in section 11, that is the grave of Doc Holiday and his father. I think his father brought him back incognito because of desecration of the graves. They cannot tell you in Glenwood Springs where Doc Holiday's grave is. This is only a memorial. They know that. I've got an affidavit signed and notarized. They are aware that that's only a memorial. That is not his grave. Yet the sign says to Doc Holiday's grave. And I've had people come into the museum here and tell me, I went to Doc Holiday's grave. And I said, oh, well, we're no Hill. And they said, well, no, I didn't Glenwood. I said, no, you went to the memorial. I said, those folks out there are aware that that is a memorial. That is not his grave. But this is his mother's grave at Sunset Cemetery down in Valdosta, Georgia. The stone that you see there is a marker that after this information got some national attention, they found this marker that was beside Alice Jane's grave got moved to the Rachel Martin plot, and they claimed that that's his grave. When I went down to do a documentary with some people from Colorado, it was missing, and I just told them, I said, Chris, I have no idea where that stone went. And what had happened, I guess they had got abreast of this information here. It was getting pretty well known that was their graves. So they found him a grave spot, and they just put it on an unmarked grave in the Rachel Martin family. Now, the reason that Major Holiday was not buried beside his wife, his ex-wife, or his deceased wife, when she passed away, it was in 1866. And back in those days, I don't know if you know that much about Southern history or not, but back in those days, you waited a year before you considered getting remarried. Major Holiday married Rachel Martin within 3 months. And that brought on some animosity from the family as well as the back. And Doc even had a little percent from his dad, towards his dad because of that. But, you know where Sweetie's flea market is? I went up there one day and I was walking by and I saw this picture. And it was of that chair, sent me a chair to that. And I laid it back down on the table, and the guy said, "That's an interesting old chair." And I said, "Yeah, that's an interesting old chair." And he said, "You'll never guess who owned that chair." I said, "I don't have a clue." He said, "Doc Holiday." So now we'll have a little fun, And I said, "Oh, really?" I picked back up and I said, "Well, where in the world did you acquire a chair that belonged to Doc Holiday?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Well, I had a friend that's a carpenter." And he said, "Doc lived down in Griffin for a while." And I said, "Well, yeah, I've heard those rumors." And he said, "Well, yeah, he did." And he said, "My friend was in a house down there that had a basement in it that he lived in." And he said that he bought this chair and he sold it to me. I said, "Well, that's amazing." I said, "Because this chair was developed manufactured in 1920 and 1930. It couldn't have belonged to Doc Holiday." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because Doc Holiday died in 1887. Might have something to do with it." And I said, "Sir, don't be trying to sell that chair. It's a chair that belonged to Doc Holiday." And I just turned around and walked away from his display. I got a phone call just shortly after that from a kid that used to pitch when I was umpiring Little League Baseball. And Gary said, "Bill, I got something in the mail for you." This was on my recorder. He said, "I've got you something in the mail I think you might be interested in." And he said, "Check your mail in the morning." So I'll go out and gather the mail and come in and pick it up. And of course, there's an envelope from Gary. And then it was an advertisement for a dental chair in the Atlanta Constitution that belonged to Doc Holiday. So I recognized the 775 number because I used to live over in Jackson, Georgia. And so I dialed the number and I said, "Who am I speaking with?" And he said, "This is Lamar Long." And I said, "Lamar, this is Bill down over in Griffin." He said, "Oh, Bill," he said, "I forgot about you owning the museum over there." He said, "I bet I know what you're calling me about." I said, "I bet you do." And I said, "Where did you get that chair?" And he said, "Do you know where Sweetie's is?" I promise you, this is a true story. Honestly, this is a true story. And he said, "That's who I got it from, And I said, "I hate to tell you this, Lamar, but I said, I told that guy about 8 months ago that chair couldn't possibly belong to Doc Holiday, that it was too modernistic to belong to Doc. It was manufactured after the turn of the century." And he said, "Well, do you have any interest in the chair? Do you want the chair?" And I said, "Not $495 worth." No, I said, "When I know it's not, a legitimate chair." He said, "No, you just tell me how to bring it to you. I'm going to bring it to you." So eventually, I was about to move this collection over to the old Coca-Cola building, and I was up talking with Brad Wynn, the young man that was renovating the building there. And his mom came in and said, "Bill, just the person I wanted to see. I found a guy that's got a chair that belonged to Doc Holiday." And I said, "Oh, another one, okay." I said, "Who's got this one?" He said, "Do you know where Sweetie's is?" And I said, "Well, wait a minute, Bertie." I said, "I've already got that chair." I said, "It's in my museum today." And she said, "Well, how long have you had it?" I said, "Over a year." And she said, "Oh, no, I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago." So if you look at the chair, the legs on this one do not have the rollers that this one has. So it was actually two different chairs.
Wow.
And he was telling the same story about this one as he was this one right here. So I thought that was it deserved a place in here to tell that story. So everybody tries to capitalize on Doc Holliday's notoriety. Now, this chair here is that is a legitimate chair from the 1870s or 1880s. There was a lady professor from Tampa Bay that came in here, Fran Grossman, when I was moving up to the Lucky Street address. I think you had seen that. And she's the one that told me that this was a legitimate chair from the right time structure.
Right.
This is the cousin that I'm convinced that went out and picked Doc's remains up and brought them back out, and he is buried, as I said, in the two graves, him and his father in the two graves there in Oak Hill Cemetery. These are actual dental tools of the turn of the century. They don't go all the way back into the 1870s, 80s when Doc was a dentist, but a gentleman from Fayetteville, Georgia, a dentist over there, Johnson, gave me these. And I thought that was a very nice donation to the museum. Right. This is just I was a mannequin of Doc Holliday, and this is a period suit from the 1870s and 80s. These are just some magazines of the subject that we're talking about, and somebody was asking me one time how many books have been made about Doc Holliday. I really don't know, but it's way up into the hundreds of books, and magazine articles are just astronomical. My friend Ben Fraywick just resigned as the city historian of Tombstone, Arizona, and he did it on the October the 26th at high noon. And I thought that was kind of unique. He picked high noon and October the 26th, as you know, was a gunfight date. And Ben is quite a knowledgeable individual, and he has written many books, and that's how I got to know him. John Henry, the Doc Holliday story, was how Ben and I become very close friends. Movies. I was checking on the internet the other day and found someone that had a listing, and there was 60 on that one list of films that had been made either for television or the big screen of Doc Holliday. So there's no telling how many. Actually, the first film was Law and Order back in 1932, where Harry Carey actually played Doc Holliday in that film. So we know it started back in 1932.
Right.
Yeah. Well, these are just some little novelty things here that we won't go into because there's not a lot of information about them on there. They're just little funny things. And if you see this little guy right here, you'll know that that's my "this is funny" guy, which that was supposedly Doc's last words. This is funny, when he looked at his feet when he's laying in the Glenwood Hotel dying of consumption, which we know today is tuberculosis. Sandra Bray did this bust here for me back years ago, and we dedicated it up at the location up on Lucky Street. And we will also see in here the Melanie Handy portrait that she did, and she is a good friend with Sandra, and we dedicated these at the same time up there. And I think both of the ladies did a very, very good job.